Since the dawn of civilization, humans have altered their environments to meet their needs of growth and progression, beginning most notably with the birth of agriculture 10,000 years ago. Between 8 and 3,000 years ago, after hundreds of generations of overfarming, overgrazing, and continued alteration of the landscape in the form of dams and canals, many of the world's first civilizations withered and collapsed under the economic and social pressures of famine and poverty. Several thousand years later, in 1930s America, overexhaustion of the soil expounded on the appalling poverty brought about by the Great Depression. The lack of care paid to the environments led to a complete social collapse of the first and a near social collapse of the second. This pattern of modification, degradation, and collapse has been a cyclical aspect of human society for the past 10,000 years. If we do not begin to understand the mistakes of our ancestors and the gravity of our situation, then it is certain that our environment will collapse under our own weight, bringing about our own demise. Conservative Christian groups deny the apparent change in climate because, quote, environmentalism is striving to put America and the world under its destructive control, seducing your children in our classrooms and popular culture. Its twisted view of the world elevates nature above the needs of people, even the poorest and most helpless. Millions are falling prey to its spiritual deception. Many ultra-conservative Christian groups find that environmentalism is a threat to the church by, quote, pointing people away from God and into humanism. Evangelical groups have created religious rights associations that advocate for speaking out against radical environmentalism and the denial of climate studies. Anti-climate change websites claim that the Global Warming Foundation has concluded that there has been no significant increase in annual global temperatures since 1997, and the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere has remained static, although the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere has increased from 370 to 390 parts per million. The modern argument opposing climate change and human-induced environmental disasters is based off of outdated data and the unshakable faith that the Earth is ours. Confusing religion with scientific collaboration, as well as a general lack of understanding of the fundamentals of basic science, has also contributed to the vast opposition encountered when climate change issues are brought up. It is also this general lack of understanding and opposition to facts that has caused countless of other societies to fail because of their actions they took themselves to improve their own lot. The unsettling truth is that, through industry and economy, human actions have had environmentally altering effects on many levels since the Industrial Revolution. It has damaged ecosystems around the world, facilitating biodiversity loss and potential extinctions. This process will be the most severe in Earth's oceans in the years to come. The ocean naturally absorbs CO2 in the air, converting it into H2CO3, carbonic acid. The overall increase in atmospheric CO2 over the past 200 years has been so large that the ocean physically does not have the capacity to absorb it all as carbonic acid. This has led to a noticeable increase in the acidity of the ocean from a pH of 8.2 to a pH of 8.0. Many marine organisms, from coral to phytoplankton, rely on aragonite for their protective shells. These shells are considerably weakened by acidic conditions, making them weaker to predators and more vulnerable in general. These organisms at the bottom of the marine food chain will be depleted, facilitating a catastrophic collapse of the food chain, triggering a mass extinction underwater and on land. This isn't just being seen in minute oceanic habitats. Globally, species loss is more drastic now than it has been since the extinction of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Species are being lost at an alarming rate that is 100 to 1,000 times greater than the average geological record suggests, a sign of another mass extinction. As many of you have learned in your high school biology class, successful ecosystems thrive on a complex, interconnected relationship in which each species, plant, animal, or otherwise, has its own unique niche. Even physical aspects of the ecosystem, such as the water in which marine animals live or the ice that Arctic animals depend on, are imperative to healthy environments. Although it may not seem so, these complex relationships are exceedingly delicate, and if disturbed, will inevitably collapse. For example, because phytoplankton are the basic unit of energy intake in the marine world, they are vital to the existence of other species. Ocean acidification decreases the population of phytoplankton, which decreases the food source for thousands of other fish and crustacean species. A reduction in the secondary population reduces food sources for larger animals such as whales, sharks, etc., and even us. I find it saddening that simply having respect for everything that you live around that supports you, living, dead, and inanimate, is not enough to make a difference. Societal change seems to be dependent on how economic it is. The whole world is a business for profit for some. I can tell you that human-induced climate change and environmental degradation will be painfully expensive in the decades to come. The projected rise in sea level for the 21st century is 30 to 40 centimeters, most of this rise being directly attributed to the ever-accelerating thermal expansion of the ocean. The science behind this accelerated expansion is relatively easy to grasp and is known as the albedo effect. Light energy from the sun is partially absorbed and reflected by certain surfaces. Ice and snow reflect about 85% of solar radiation. Open water, which is dark, reflects only about 7%. Bare ice reflects 65%. The warmer water will act as a blanket, trapping and diffusing heat, and accounting for the acceleration of warming, predicted rises in sea level could be closer to 1 to 2 feet. It seems all our problems are accelerating in magnitude. Human population, as well as overall standard of living around the globe, is expected to increase exponentially and will greatly increase the demand for agricultural products. It is projected that by the year 2050, world population will increase by 2 to 3 billion, which is projected to more than double the current demand for food. This will be a result of higher real incomes and higher standards of living for a larger share of the population. Demand will increase mostly with meat, the least efficient and least productive of all agricultural products. At our current rate of production, that level of demand would be simply catastrophic, and with only approximately 30% of Earth's land being arable, it may not only be a daunting task, but an impossible one. From the years 2000 to 2050, global production of staple crops such as corn, wheat, rice, and potatoes are projected to decrease from current levels. In order to meet the projected demand of 2050, annual global agricultural production will have to increase by 60 to 70%. Inefficient agriculture is also the number one reason for deforestation around the world, and is done so by clearing land and redirecting freshwater sources for irrigation. Negative human interaction with the environment is happening, but even those who acknowledge the science to prove it claim that overall, reducing carbon emissions of entire countries is not economic and overall bad for the economy. One such claim is that switching to renewable sources of energy would require higher energy taxes and regulations, causing the nation to lose 2.4 million jobs and $300 billion in annual economic output. They continue their rant by scaring people into thinking that average household income nationwide will fall by $2,700 and state tax revenues would decline by $93.1 billion due to less taxable earned income in sales and lower property values. These two are viable points that are very possible outcomes of switching to renewable energies. The conservative sources, although, do not incorporate the overwhelming benefits of switching to renewable resources in their calculations. In California alone, by switching to renewable resources, 12,528 deaths would be avoided from air pollution, $127.9 billion saved from illness and death by the state, $7,395 saved annually per person due to health costs and climate in the state. In Texas, the numbers would be just as overwhelming. 4,217 lives saved, $54.2 billion saved for the state, and $11,923 saved per person. Not only would money be saved by consumers in this respect, but by the year 2050, the cost per kilowatt hour of energy produced by nuclear and fossil fuels, as well as the insurance to cover pollution-related ailments, would be 16.4 cents in both states. The cost per kilowatt hour would only be 9.7 cents for California and 8.7 cents for Texas. Human-induced climate change will have expensive implications for the future in order to adapt to higher sea levels, higher temperatures, the increasing cost of fossil fuels, and increasing cost of healthcare. With about 40% and growing of the world's population living within 100 kilometers of the coast, rising sea levels will affect more and more people and infrastructure in the years to come. Rising sea levels, as explained earlier, can worsen the impacts of tropical storms, hurricanes, and typhoons, resulting in increased expenditure on repair relief efforts. Over the past several decades, disaster relief expenditure and total damage has shown a steady increase, correlating with that of rising sea levels and atmospheric temperatures. These rising sea levels threaten freshwater supplies for people living in low-lying areas, and more severe storms can cause city sewage systems to overflow. Over the next several decades, we as a global population will have to choose for ourselves whether or not we want to change the current course of environmental degradation. The implications of our actions today may lead us to an ever bleak and violent future, one in which simple commodities such as water or crops are fought over by individuals or entire countries.